Hello everyone, welcome to the Java interview questions preparation series. In today's video, we are going to understand final keyword in a Java. So the final keyword in the Java is mainly used to restrict any type of modifications to the variables, methods, and the classes. The behavior of final keyword in the Java slightly changes based upon where we are using it. So without further delay, let's try to understand what is final keyword in the Java. So first of all, let's try to understand how the final keyword works with the variables in the Java. So I have just created one class called as a final variable example. And in this, I have just created one method called as a display. And I'm just calling that display method uh, from my main method. So this is the basic class that I have created just to save some time. So over here, first of all, let's try to create one variable. Let's suppose int x, and let me just give the semicolon. And in the display method, let me just try to print the value of x like this. And now let me just run this code. So it's pretty simple code. It should print the value of x on the console. Yes, so we are able to see the value of x is 0. So 0 is nothing but the default value of integer. Because we haven't assigned any value, it is taking the default value of the integer. Now, let me just assign some value over here. Let's suppose 10. And now we can just save this and we can run this again. Now this time it should print the value of x is a 10. Yes, it is printing the value of x is a 10. So this is the normal scenario where we have just created one variable called as x and we have assigned a value to the x, that is 10. Now let's suppose if there is any situation where we want to change the value of x, then what we can just do, we can just simply go inside the display method or wherever we want to change the value, and we can just assign the value, that is x is equals to 20. So over here, I'm just initializing x with a 10, and inside the display method, I'm just changing value to the 20. And now if I just run the code, it should print us that the value of x is 20, right? So over here, we have just created one variable where we have assigned a value that is 10, which is initial value. And in the display method, we are able to change the value. So this is how the normal variable works when we use it in a Java. Now, similarly, let me just create one more variable called as a y, but this time, let me just use one keyword called as a final keyword. And as soon as I started using a final keyword, I am getting one error over here. And if I just try to hover on the error, we are just saying that variable y might not have been initialized. So as soon as I have used a final keyword, it is giving us the error, and it is saying that as we are using a final keyword, we must have to give the initial value to the y variable. So we must have to give the initial value. Now there are multiple ways using which we can assign the initial value. So over here, there is one catch that we have to understand. We must have to give value to the y till execution of the constructor is complete. So we can assign value to the y till or before execution of the constructor gets completed. So over here, we have three different ways. Either we can assign value to the y directly inline, something like this. So as soon as I assigned a value that is 30, the error is now gone, and maybe we can just again try to print the value of y, and let me just give variable as a y over here. And if we just try to run the code, it should print us the value of y is 30, and it is working perfectly fine. Now we can just remove this inline value initialization. Instead, we can also give value to the y inside the block. So if we want to create a block, it is pretty simple. We just have to give these two curly brackets, and we don't have to give any name. We don't have to give anything but to the block. We just have to give these curly brackets, and we can just assign value to the y, something like this. And again, the error will be gone. And again, if we just try to run the code, we will be able to see value of y is 40. And the last way that we can use to assign value to the y is a constructor. So we can just create one public constructor, that is final variable example. And let me just comment out this particular block. And again, we started getting the error inside the constructor. Let me just assign value to the y. And again, we will not be able to see any error. If we just try to run this, we will see the value of y is 50. So by this concept, what we understood that when we use a final keyword with a variable, we must have to initialize the value before constructor execution is completed. So there are three ways. Either we can assign value inline, or we can use a blocks, or we can use a constructor. We can assign value to the final variable using either of these three ways. Okay. Now let's keep the value y is equals to 50, and inside the display method, let's try to change the value. So let's try to make it as a 60. Now, if I just try to make it as a 60, I am getting one error over here. And if we just hover it, we will see that cannot assign a value to a final variable y. So this error basically saying that we cannot reassign a value, or we cannot change the value of the y. So the reason behind this is because y is a final variable, and as I said earlier, the main motive or main purpose of using final keyword is to restrict any type of changes with the variable. So that is the reason we are not able to change the value. So once value of variable is initialized, we cannot change the value. So this is how final keyword works with a variable. Now let me just remove this line. And there is one more question that may come in a mind is what what if we use the final variable final keyword with a static keyword? So yes, we can definitely use a final keyword and static keyword together, but again there is slightly change. So uh, let me go at the up, and we can create one variable called as a final, then static int set, something like this. And again, as expected, we are getting the error. And over here, again, it is saying that variable C might not have been initialized. And again, we must have to give the initial value of this variable Z. Again, how we can give the value? Either we can use a inline value initialization, or we can use a block. But this time, we must have to use a static block. So either we can assign value to the set variable inline, or we must have to use a static block. So in order to create a static block, we have to write a static, and then we just have to give these curly brackets. And inside these block, let me assign value, something like this. And as soon as we assigned a value, the error is gone, and we can again simply print the value of z is set, and we can save it, and we can just try to run it. And this time we should be able to see the message that the value of z is 100. Now we cannot assign value to this variable thread inside the constructor. Why? Because this time the variable z is a static variable, and as static is used at the class level, it is not at the object level. We cannot use the constructor, because constructor is especially made for creating the objects. So that is the reason we cannot use it with a static. So if I just try to comment out this block, and if I just come inside the constructor, and if I just try to assign some value inside the constructor, we will again get the error. Why? Because the constructor is at the object level, and static keyword works at the class level. So it is again saying that the variable z might not have been initialized. So we must have to use a static block. And as soon as I use a static block, again I'm getting error at the below saying that we cannot assign value to the set because it is already initialized. So this is how the final keyword works. So I hope you got the idea like how the final keyword works. It basically restricts any type of modifications to the variable. So once value of final keyword is assigned, we cannot change the value. If it is a normal like non-static variable, we can assign value to the non-static variable using inline initialization or using non-static block or inside the constructor. But if the variable is static, then we can assign value using inline initialization or using the static block, right? So this is how the variable works. Now let's try to understand how the final keyword works with a method. So over here, just to save a time, I have created one class called as a final method example. And inside the final method example class, I have created one method called as a print, which is printing a simple message called as hello from parent class. So this is the normal class that I have created. Now let's suppose if we create one child class of this final method example class. So let me just go and let me just create one new class called as a final method example IMPL, and let me now extend this with final method example class. And over here at the final method example IMPL extends to the final method example, we can override the print method. So over here, first of all, let me just try to create a main method, and let me just try to create object of this implementation class like this. And now we can just call the print method, something like this. And now if we just try to run this code, we should be able to see that the message hello from a parent class. So over here, this IMPL is my child class and it is extending the method from its parent class. And so that is the reason we are able to see the message. Now, if inside the inheritance, if child wants, child can override the method. So how we can override? We can just create public void and we can just copy the name, which is a print, and we can just give the overridden message like hello from child class, something like this. And just to make sure we are overriding a method from our parent, we can just use one annotation called as @override. And now if we just save it and if we just run it, we will be able to see the message hello from child class. So it is working as expected. Now let's suppose if we want to restrict the modification, if we want to restrict the modification to the method, we can use a final keyword. So over here, inside the inheritance, what we are doing, we are just creating one print method inside the parent class, and we are changing the, or we are modifying the body of this print method inside the child class. So we are modifying the body of the method, right? And if we want to restrict this modification, we can use a final keyword. So if I just go to the parent class and if I just try to use a final keyword, as soon as I use a final keyword, we started getting some error. So over here, what it is saying? It is saying that print cannot override print in the class. Overridden method is a final. So it is basically saying that the method print is a final, and that is the reason you cannot override it. So again, the final keyword is restricting any type of changes or any type of modifications to the method body. So that is the reason we are unable to overwrite this method. So we cannot overwrite. So let me just remove this body, and now all the errors are gone. If we just try to run it, we will be able to see the message hello from parent class. So this is how final keyword works when we use it with a method. Again, the next question that may come into mind is, can we use a final and static combination? So basically, we can use the final and static combination, but it is not expected. Why? Because static methods are anyway not allowed to override, right? Because we cannot override static methods. And that is the reason there is no any meaning to use a static and finals together, because static methods are anyway not going to be overridden. So we should not use, actually. We can use, but we should not use. So let me just show you quickly. Let me just try to make this print method as a static. And if I just use a static keyword, we will get some warning over here. So if we just hover on this warning, we will see that static method declared a final. So it is not giving the compile time error, but it is saying that static method is declared as a final. So it is basically giving us a warning saying that there is no any meaning to use a static and final keywords together. Why? Because static methods, anyways, we cannot overwrite, right? And that is the reason we should not use a final keyword with a static. So this is how the final keyword works with the methods. Now, lastly, let's try to understand how final keyword works when we use it with the classes. So again, I have created one simple class called as a final class example. And over here, this is pretty empty class. And over here, let me just try to create one more class called as a final class example IMPI. So over here, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to create one child class, uh, which will extend properties from the parent. And over here, let me just quickly rename the class because I have just misspelled it. So let me just rename it to the final, like this. Yep. And now inside the child class, let me just try to use extends, and let me just give the name as final class example. And right now, we are not able to see any type of errors. We are not able to see any kind of warnings, and everything is looking perfectly fine. But again, what we are doing over here, we have just created one parent class and we have just created one child class. So the basic behavior of inheritance is to override the changes or change the modification. So in such a cases, if we just try to restrict these modifications to the class level, what we can do, we can just declare our class as a final class. So we can just use a keyword called as a final. Not here, we just have to use public final, like this. And as soon as I used a final keyword, we started getting error inside the child class. And if you just hover on the error, we are able to see the message like cannot inherit from final class. So it is basically saying that the final class example is a final class, so we cannot override the class or we cannot extend the class. So we are getting some errors over here. So once we use a final keyword with a class, we cannot create child class of that class. So this is how final keyword works when we use it with a class label. Now again, there might be some questions that may arise. Can we use the final keyword and abstract keyword together? So if I just try to use final and abstract together, we will be getting some errors again. So if we just try to hover on it, so what it is saying, illegal combination of modifiers, final and abstract. So as you may know, the abstract keyword, when we use abstract keyword, it basically forces us to create child classes, and final keyword restricts us to from creating a child classes. So it is kind of a bad combination because final keyword is saying that you cannot create a child class. On the other hand, abstract keyword is saying that you must have to create a child class. So this is how, like, this is the bad combination that we are using. So that is the reason we cannot use a final and abstract keywords together. Either we can make class as a final or a abstract. So this is how uh, final keyword works when we use it with the classes. So just a kind of quick recap, if we create or if we just use a final keyword with the variables, we cannot change the value of the variable. So once value is assigned. So if we have a non-static variable, we can assign value using inline initialization or using a blocks, non-static blocks, or using a constructor. If we have a static variable, then we can again initialize that variable using inline initialization or a static block. If we use a final keyword with a method, then we cannot override that method inside the child class. And if we use a final keyword with the class, then that we cannot create a child class of that class. So this is how the final keyword works. So I hope you got the idea around the final keyword. If you still have any questions, let me know into a comment section and I will try my best to answer those questions. I hope you enjoyed this video and we will see you in the next video.